The initial urgent call I ever made was to my mother. The final one she ever had to place was to me. This isn't mere chance. It's a bond forged across 53 years, built on countless everyday acts of affection. Rebecca Watson was not an intricate woman. She didn't need to be. She was the sort of mother who faithfully attended every single one of my youth baseball games, arriving with her own folding chair. She'd pack my midday meals until I reached an age where I found it a bit embarrassing, and she'd remain awake, awaiting my return whenever I was out late. Her vigil wasn't for chastisement, but simply because she couldn't rest until she knew I was safe. That was her essence, her consistent nature. Love for Rebecca Watson wasn't a subject of discourse. It was a practice, undertaken daily, silently, without expectation of reciprocation. When my father passed on a Wednesday morning in November, 12 years ago, on a day that irrevocably alters a month's character, she didn't crumble. She mourned as she did everything else, with inherent grace and an unbowed spirit. She sold one of her vehicles to cover the funeral expenses, informing me only after the transaction was complete. She maintained the household on a reduced budget, yet still managed to prepare a comforting meal every Sunday for anyone who happened to visit. In the entire 12 years that followed, she never once contacted me to express any hardship. Therefore, understand this. When Rebecca Watson contacted me at precisely 7:42 on a Wednesday morning, reporting an odd sensation in her chest, I reacted without pause or deliberation. There was no need to weigh alternatives. For 53 years of her unwavering love does not cultivate a man prone to hesitation. It nurtures one who acts instantly, unconditionally. What it doesn't prepare you for, however, is the person standing between you and your objective. My name is Wesley Watson, and I am 53 years of age. I volunteer as a youth baseball coach on weekends. For a long time, I considered myself the kind of husband who believed maintaining tranquility was synonymous with achieving peace. I was mistaken. It took me some time, but I eventually grasped the truth. It was a Wednesday, the 14th of January, at 7:42 in the morning. I recall the precise moment because I was standing in the kitchen, observing the coffee slowly percolate, as if it too were reluctant for the day to commence, when my phone vibrated on the counter. Mom, I answered on the second ring. Wesley. Her voice was fragile, unlike her customary tone. Rebecca Watson was not one for fragility. This woman had navigated the loss of a husband, economic downturns, and a hip replacement without ever soliciting assistance from anyone. Mom, are you all right? I didn't want to trouble you. There was again, 82 years old and still offering apologies for her very existence. It's amusing how that works, I remarked, already moving towards the hallway. Just a tightness, and my left arm feels peculiar. She paused. Mom, I'm sure it's nothing. Mom, please stop. I'm on my way. I ended the call and stood motionless for precisely 3 seconds. My vehicle, a 2019 Chevy Silverado, was at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street. The alternator, they'd informed me the previous day. It wouldn't be ready before Friday at the earliest. Okay, think, Wesley, think. Eve's car, a silver Honda CR-V, sat idly in the driveway, fully operational. She had refueled it herself on Monday. He was upstairs. I could hear the shower running. That prolonged, indulgent 30-minute shower she took each morning, as if preparing for a fashion shoot. I approached the foot of the stairs. Eve. The shower continued its flow. Eve. The sound of water ceased. A drawn-out silence. What? Not a what of concern. A what? That demands a justification. This had better be significant. I need to borrow your car. My mother is experiencing chest discomfort. I need to take her to St. Francis. I'll return it promptly. Silence. Not the contemplative kind. the kind that signals a decision already made, with the speaker merely choosing their words. She appeared at the top of the stairs 30 seconds later, a towel wrapped around her head, a robe cinched at the waist, her expression utterly unreadable. "Wesley, I can't today." "Eve, my mother is experiencing chest pains. Her left arm is numb." "I heard you." She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "Call an ambulance." She dislikes ambulances. She had a distressing experience when Dad then called someone else. She was already turning back towards the bedroom. "I have a dinner engagement with Joanne and the girls this evening, and I still have a full workday ahead. I'm not inclined to spend my entire day in a hospital waiting area." I remained perfectly still. "Did you just say that?" "Eve." My voice emerged softer than I had anticipated. "Her left arm is going numb." She halted, turned halfway, and met my gaze with an expression I will forever carry. Not concern, not remorse, but inconvenience. "She is your mother, Wesley, not mine." A pause. "Figure it out. Figure it out." She retreated into the bedroom. The door didn't slam, which was almost more unsettling. A slam would have indicated emotion. She simply closed it gently, as if informing me we were out of milk, as if an 82-year-old woman's left arm going numb was a minor scheduling inconvenience she couldn't accommodate. I stood there for a brief interval. Then I retrieved my phone. Clinton Webb resided 4 houses down on the same street. A retired union electrician, 71 years old. He drove a meticulously maintained older Honda Civic that, while past its prime, never failed to start each morning, much like its owner. He was the sort of man who still offered a firm handshake. He and my mother had known each other for over 2 decades. He had been present at my father's funeral, occupying a front row seat. He answered on the first ring. "Wes, what's happening, brother?" "Clinton, I need a favor. My mother is experiencing chest discomfort. My truck is in the shop, and Eve's car is unavailable. Could you drive us to St. Francis?" There wasn't even a moment's hesitation. "Give me 4 minutes. I'll be pulling up front." That was it. No negotiation, no conditions, no checking of existing commitments. For minutes, I immediately call Mom back. "I'm en route, Mom. Clinton is driving. You don't need to do a thing. Just unlock the front door and have a seat. Do you understand me? Sit down. Wesley, I really don't wish to cause a disturbance." "Mom, yes. Sit down." A faint sound, almost a chuckle. "All right, darling." Clinton arrived in precisely 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I kept track. The journey to St. Francis Hospital on Woodland Street took 9 minutes. Mom occupied the back seat beside me, her small hand clasped firmly in both of mine. She wore her good blue coat, as if attending an important event, because indeed, she was. She continued to offer apologies throughout the ride. "I'm so sorry to trouble you, Clinton. It's nothing really. I was just watching the news." "Was it anything engaging?" "Nothing ever is." She let out a genuine laugh, and as I gazed out the window at the Hartford morning, I felt 2 distinct emotions simultaneously. Gratitude for Clinton, and something else, something cold and quiet. For Eve. I didn't analyze it then. I simply allowed it to reside within me. St. Francis was experiencing a busy Wednesday morning. We checked in at the emergency room at 8:27 a.m. A nurse named Beverly, a woman with broad shoulders and a no-nonsense demeanor, clearly someone who had witnessed a great deal, escorted Mom to her room within 15 minutes. The physician on duty was a tall gentleman named Dr. Marcus Lane. He possessed a calm voice and deliberate movements. He proceeded without haste. "Mrs. Watson, I intend to perform an EKG and analyze your enzyme levels. The symptoms you've described, given your age, are not to be disregarded." Mom looked at me, her eyes silently asking if she should be apprehensive. "Do as he says, Mom." I reassured her. She nodded, then reached up and gently touched my face. You came, she stated simply, as if she hadn't been entirely certain I would. That moment nearly overwhelmed me. Mom, I will always come for you. She patted my cheek twice, reclined on the pillow, and closed her eyes. I remained in that waiting room for 2 hours and 40 minutes. A plastic chair, dim lighting, a television mounted in the corner displaying a game show on mute. I consumed the worst coffee of my life from a machine near the elevator, tasting not a single drop. Eve did not send a single text message, not even a simple inquiry. Is she okay? At 11:04, Dr. Lane emerged to find me. His expression was measured, not alarmed, but serious. Mr. Watson, your mother experienced what we classify as a mild cardiac event. It was not a full heart attack, but her body was signaling distress. We intend to keep her for observation, conduct further tests, and adjust her medication. Is she stable? She is stable. She is also inquiring if her room has a television. I let out a genuine laugh. That's precisely her. May I see her? Please allow us 20 minutes to get her settled. I sank back into my seat, propped my elbows on my knees, and focused on the floor. Figure out, Eve said. Figure it out. While she was enjoying dinner with Joanne and the girls, while her mother-in-law's heart was sending out distress signals. I did figure out, indeed. I reached for my phone and called Clinton, who had remained in the parking lot the entire duration, demonstrating the caliber of man he is. She's stable, I informed him. Thank heavens, he responded, and he genuinely meant it. Clinton, thank you. Wes. His voice was firm yet gentle. That's what people do. I let his words linger in the air for a moment. Some people. I stayed with Mom until 4 p.m. We watched half of a game show, this time with sound, and she defeated me twice in a word game she spontaneously invented, incorporating hospital equipment and state capitals. She possessed a sharper intellect than I did on my worst day. She always had. At 3:47, just before my departure, she again took my hand. Wesley. Her voice had undergone a transformation. The fragile tone from that morning had vanished. This was her other voice, the one she employed when she intended something significant. Yes, Mom. Eve didn't attend. It wasn't phrased as a question. I hesitated before responding. She had dinner plans. Just my name. That was all she required. I looked at her. 82 years old. Her blue coat neatly folded over the chair. Her eyes as clear as they had ever been. She went to dinner, Mom, I stated quietly, with her friends. Those words descended into the hospital room like an object dropped from a great height. Mom didn't gasp. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't utter a single syllable concerning Eve Watson. She simply nodded slowly, her gaze drifting towards the window. The afternoon sunlight illuminated the Hartford skyline with a particular brilliance. Golden, tranquil, and weary. She offered no further remarks, but I observed a subtle shift across her countenance, something that strongly resembled a resolution. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 p.m. I exited St. Francis Hospital into the crisp Connecticut air. Clinton was there to collect me. We drove home in a comfortable silence. And somewhere along Blue Hills Avenue, with the oak leaves streaming past the windshield as if the world were shedding an unnecessary burden, I realized I wasn't angry with Eve. I was simply finished. Some individuals spend their entire lives making withdrawals from relationships into which they never bothered to make deposits. Eve had been overdrawn for years. Thursday, January 15th, at 6:58 in the morning. I awoke before my alarm. That's how you know something is weighing on you that sleep cannot dislodge. I lay on my side of the bed, the left side as always. 11 years, and I still slept as if leaving space for someone who might wish to be there, gazing at the ceiling. Eve was still asleep. Her hair fanned across the pillow, her breathing slow and even, completely undisturbed. That woman could sleep through a verdict. I rose quietly, descended the stairs, and prepared coffee. Yes, using the noisy machine, and no, I felt no remorse. Not even a flicker. She chose dinner over my mother's left arm going numb. She could tolerate the coffee maker's noise. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the morning light creep through the window above the sink. My phone rested face down on the table. I turned it over. No messages from St. Francis. At 7 a.m., no news was good news. I contemplated Mom, the way she had appeared in that hospital bed. Small against the pillow, her cherished blue coat draped over the chair as if she had dressed for the occasion of illness. The way she had touched my face and whispered, "You came," as if she hadn't been entirely convinced I would. You came. 2 words. 82 years of love distilled into 2 words. And they nearly broke me once more as I sat at that kitchen table with my cooling coffee. She had always come for me, without exception, without conditions. The absolute least I could do was come for her. I was on my second cup when I heard Eve on the stairs. She entered the kitchen in her robe, cast a glance at me, then at the coffee machine, and finally back at me. "You made coffee." "Every morning for 11 years," I responded. "It's remarkable it still surprises you." She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. A beat of silence followed, the specific kind that married couples recognize, the kind that anticipates someone initiating a topic. She finally broke the silence. "How is Rebecca?" "Rebecca, not your mother, not Mom. Rebecca," as if she were a colleague, an acquaintance from a work function Eve had forgotten attending. "Stable," I replied. "A mild cardiac event. They're keeping her for an additional day." She repeated it slowly, as if savoring the words. Another silence. "How was your dinner?" I inquired. She blinked. "Just once, but I noticed." "It was fine," she stated carefully. "Wesley, I want you to understand that yesterday was quite complex for me." "Complex?" I let the word hang between us for a moment. "Your distress signals, and you were at a restaurant, but certainly complicated." "Wesley." "Eve." I uttered her name with the same intonation my mother had used for mine the previous night. Simply the word. Just the name. Flat and definitive. She stopped. "I'm not engaging in this conversation right now," I said. "I'm merely attempting to explain." "I understand." I stood up, rinsed my mug. "I heard you the first time. Yesterday, at the foot of the stairs. I gathered my phone, my jacket, my keys, and my spare set as my truck was still at Kowalski's, and proceeded towards the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To visit my mother." I didn't look back. Clinton drove me again. He asked no questions, offered no commentary, simply drove, one hand on the steering wheel, an old country music station playing softly on the radio. There exists a particular kind of camaraderie that thrives without the necessity of words. Clinton and I shared that. We always had. We parked at St. Francis at 8:40 a.m. "I'll be waiting," he stated. "Clinton, man, you don't have to." "Wes." He peered at me over the rim of his glasses. "I'll be here." Some individuals consistently show up. Make a note of them. Record it somewhere indelible. Mom was sitting upright when I entered her room. Color had returned to her face. The fragile voice was entirely absent. She was wearing her own nightgown. She had declined the hospital gown after the first night, a decision I deeply respected, and she had her reading glasses on. A crossword puzzle book lay open in her lap. 7 letters, she announced the moment I entered. Betrayal. I paused in the doorway, gazing at her. She looked up over her glasses with the most unruffled expression I had ever witnessed on a human face. For the crossword, Wesley, I burst into laughter, so heartily that the nurse glanced in from the hallway. "Perfect," I declared, settling into the chair beside her bed. P-A-F-E-S-I-T. She counted the spaces, filled in the letters, and nodded with profound satisfaction. You were always the intelligent one. I'm your only child, Mom, and still the intelligent one. We sat in comfortable silence for some time. The kind of quietude that exists only between individuals who have loved each other long enough to dispense with the need to fill every void. She completed 2 more clues. I sipped the unpalatable hospital coffee without complaint, because being in that room with her, even in a rigid plastic chair, consuming something that tasted of regret, was precisely where I desired to be, where I would always desire to be. Then, she closed the book, placed it on the bedside table, and folded her hands in her lap. Here we go. I wish to call Paul this morning, she announced. Paul Logan. Mr. Paul Logan, attorney at law, Hartford County, 31 years in practice. He had managed my father's estate and drafted Mom's will 6 years prior. A sharp, precise individual. The sort of lawyer who listened more than he spoke, a rarity in my experience. I maintained a careful tone. All right, I've been contemplating, she continued, since last night. Mom, you don't need to. Wesley Andrew Watson. Her full name. All 3. I hadn't heard all 3 names since I was 17 and returned home 40 minutes past curfew. Do not complete that sentence. I closed my mouth. She regarded me with those clear, steady eyes. The Hartford light streamed through the window again, softer this morning. It made her appear younger somehow, or perhaps it simply revealed her essence more clearly. Exactly like the woman who had packed my lunch and waited up, who had sold a car without informing me, who had hosted Sunday dinners for 34 years on Maplewood Drive. My mother, the most constant presence in my life. I have dedicated my entire life to my work, she stated softly. Your father and I, we diligently saved and went without so that what we built would hold significance, so that it would be directed towards something that mattered. A pause, towards people who showed up. I remained silent. You didn't show up, Wesley. I am aware. Not just yesterday. She picked up her crossword book, not to work on it, but simply to hold something. Not at your father's funeral reception. Not when I underwent hip surgery and required transportation for physical therapy. Not at Christmas 2 years ago, when I had the flu and you had to depart from dinner to check on me. She looked up. And not yesterday, when my heart was faltering. She attended dinner. Every single instance registered like a stone dropped into calm water, sinking slowly, penetrating deeply. Because she was right. She had consistently been right, and for years I had offered justifications. Mom, I'm not angry, she said. And the remarkable aspect was she wasn't. Her voice was entirely composed, steady as an oath sworn on a Bible. I'm simply factual. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, retrieved a small, folded piece of paper from her glasses case. A telephone number pinned in her precise, deliberate handwriting. Mr. Paul Logan, direct line. She had come prepared. My mother did not make rash decisions. This matter had been developing for longer than a single hospital stay. Would you like me to step out? I inquired. She considered it for a moment, then responded, No. Remain. Remain. One word, and my entire being stilled with gratitude. She dialed at 9:22 a.m. He answered on the second ring. Paul Logan. Paul, it's Rebecca Watson. I hope I'm not reaching you too early. Mrs. Watson. His voice immediately softened. Never too early for you. How are you? I'm actually in a hospital. St. Francis. A brief pause. I'm sorry to hear that. Is it serious? Serious enough to provide clarity, she stated. Even in that moment, as she contacted her lawyer from a hospital bed the morning after a cardiac event, her voice conveyed dignity, a profound grace. The kind that cannot be feigned. The kind that is cultivated over 82 years of acting justly, even at a personal cost. Paul, I need to update my legal documents, specifically my will. Silence emanated from his end. Professional silence. Absorbing, not delaying. Of course. Would you prefer I come to you, or? Please. Today, if feasible. I have some very specific alterations in mind. I can be there by 2 p.m. perfect. She glanced at me. My son will accompany me. Very well, Mrs. Watson. I will see you at 2 p.m. She concluded the call, placed the phone down, and resumed her crossword puzzle. Just like that. As if she hadn't just irrevocably altered everything. As if she hadn't just expressed her love for me in the most powerful and enduring manner a mother could. I sat there for a moment. My throat felt tight, my eyes steady barely. Mom, my voice emerged softer than I had intended. You don't have to do this for me. She didn't look up from the crossword. I am not doing this for you, Wesley. She filled in a letter. Calmly, deliberately. I am doing this because I have earned the right to determine the destination of my life's work, and I have made that decision. She looked up over her glasses. Do you have any other questions? I had approximately 40. I posed 0. No, ma'am. Good. She returned to the puzzle. Kindly fetch me something palatable from that canteen. Whatever sustenance they've been providing for my morning repast has tasted like a poorly considered choice. For a fleeting moment, just one, my gaze fell upon her. This compact, keen, and remarkable woman, attired in her own night clothes, within the confines of a Hartford hospital room, diligently completing crossword puzzle clues as if the world owed her nothing and she, in turn, owed it everything. In that instant, I realized I had dedicated 53 years to striving for her approval. I sincerely hope I'm making progress. Mr. Paul Logan made his arrival at precisely 1:58 in the afternoon. He was clad in a charcoal suit, carried a leather satchel, and sported a silver haircut, neatly trimmed. He grasped my hand with a firm grip, offered a nod indicative of someone who understood the significance of space, and then settled opposite my mother, equipped with a yellow legal pad and a writing instrument that likely surpassed the cost of my vehicle's alternator. I remained in my corner, silent and still, an observer. Their exchange spanned 47 minutes. I should not recount every syllable. Certain matters merit their own sanctity. However, I will impart this much. By the time Paul Logan snapped his pen shut and returned his legal pad to its briefcase, the document that Eve Watson had been quietly anticipating for 11 years of her marriage had been fundamentally, irrevocably, and legally reconfigured. The residence on Maplewood Drive, which my mother owned outright and had fully paid off in the year 2009, Wesley. The investment portfolios that my father had meticulously cultivated over 3 decades, Wesley. The adornments, the furnishings, the 1967 Ford Mustang, still in perfect working order and housed under a protective cover in her garage. The automobile my father had dedicated 4 years to restoring with his own hands, the very vehicle that carried his scent on warmer days when the garage door was opened. Wesley, in $20,000, specifically designated for the Hartford Animal Shelter situated on Brainerd Road. This was in recognition of Rebecca Watson's voluntary service there every 3rd Saturday for 11 years, because that was the caliber of woman she was. Eve's name was conspicuously absent, appearing precisely 0 times. Not my concern, someone had once remarked. It appears that assertion was indeed correct. As Logan prepared to depart, he extended his hand to me once more at the doorway. Your mother, he stated quietly, glancing back at her across the room, already engrossed in her crossword once more, utterly unperturbed, completely herself, is one of the most astute individuals I've encountered in my 31 years of practice. I met his gaze, then looked at her as well. Yes, I affirmed. I am aware. I've always been. I departed the hospital at precisely 4:30 in the afternoon. Clinton was available to drive me home. I entered the vehicle and closed the door. He studied me, his expression conveying an understanding shared by old friends, not probing for details, merely confirming my continued presence. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I replied softly. "Everything is precisely as it ought to be." He offered a nod and engaged the drive. We pulled away from St. Francis and navigated back toward Asylum Avenue. My mobile device rested silently in my pocket. Eve had not initiated a single call the entire day. She remained utterly unaware. Completely and utterly unaware. But she would soon learn. Friday, the 16th of January, 8:14 in the morning. I was at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street when the situation began to unfold. My truck was finally prepared. A new alternator, an oil change that Danny Kowalski had graciously included because our children had participated in Little League together, a gesture befitting neighbors, and a fresh set of windshield wiper blades, a service I hadn't requested. I stood at the counter, signing the final invoice when my phone vibrated. "Eve." I let it ring. Not for strategic purposes, not yet. I simply had nothing to articulate at that moment, nothing that would resonate as it needed to. Not yet. I slipped the phone back into my jacket, concluded the signing, shook Danny's hand, and stepped out into the crisp Hartford morning. The air was sharp, cold, and refreshingly candid. I started the engine, allowed it to warm, and sat there, observing my breath miss the windshield, contemplating my mother. The prospect of bringing her back to Maplewood Drive, where she truly belonged. Of settling her in her kitchen with her customary tea, her crossword puzzle, and her dignity fully restored. That was the sole focus of the day. Not Eve, not the repeated calls. None of that. Today was about welcoming my mother home. My phone buzzed again. Eve. Once more. Then a third time. Then a fourth. Then a fifth. Something was occurring. I exited Kowalski's premises and directed my vehicle towards St. Francis. I had a mother to bring home. She was ready by the time I arrived. 8:53 in the morning. A blue coat, a small overnight bag meticulously packed. Beverly, the nurse, walked beside her, accompanied by another attendant who held the mandatory wheelchair. Hospital protocol, completely non-negotiable. My mother had already engaged in a spirited, yet ultimately unsuccessful, debate with characteristic poise. The instant she cleared the automatic doors, she rose from the wheelchair. "I can walk to my son's truck," she announced, her voice carrying to everyone within earshot, though directed at no one in particular. I experienced a cardiac event, not a personality amputation. Beverly chuckled, a genuine sound, not the perfunctory kind. She took my mother's hands in both of hers, holding them for a moment. "Take good care of yourself, Mrs. Watson." "I always do, dear," my mother replied, squeezing Beverly's hands. "You're a fine one. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Beverly pressed her lips together, appearing to suppress an emotion. Then she nodded and stepped back. Even metaphorically speaking, in her hospital gown, my mother consistently left individuals in a better state than she found them. I held open the passenger door. She climbed in slowly, deliberately, yet independently, a detail that held more significance for her than any prescribed medication, any instruction, any doctor's directive. Her autonomy was the last bastion she would relinquish, a fact we both acknowledged. I closed the door, walked around the vehicle, and took my place in the driver's seat. She observed my mobile device, face up in the cup holder, its screen illuminating every 30 seconds. Eve, Eve, Eve. 11 unanswered calls before 9 in the morning. My mother remained silent, simply fastening her seatbelt and offering a faint smile out the window. She appeared at peace, as though she had made a definitive decision and was fully content with its implications. I first transported her back to Maplewood Drive. The classic white colonial with the green shutters stood serenely and familiarly at the end of the street. The house where I had learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway, where I had completed homework at the kitchen table, where my father had meticulously constructed a life, brick by careful brick, and left it standing when he departed. The grand oak tree in the front yard had shed most of its foliage. The porch was impeccably swept. The welcome mat, bearing the word home, in faded lettering, had been there so long that neither of us consciously registered its presence anymore. But today I noticed it. I guided her inside and prepared her tea. The precise blend, chamomile bags steeped for precisely 4 minutes, a detail she had once shared, which I had never forgotten. I adjusted the thermostat, checked the refrigerator, and meticulously reviewed the new prescription from Dr. Lane, reading the labels aloud while she listened, her hands cradling her mug. "Wesley," she began, "this one is for your blood pressure, to be taken twice daily with meals." She was observing me from across the kitchen table, the very table where she had baked every birthday cake, where she had assisted me with algebra, where she had sat the morning after my father's passing, holding my hand in profound silence. Because some things transcend the need for words. "Sit down," she requested softly. I complied. She reached across the table, covering my hand with both of hers. Her hands were small and warm, the very hands that had packed my lunch, buttoned my coat, waved from the bleachers, and held mine in the back seat of Clinton's truck on our way to this very hospital 2 days prior. These hands had consistently supported me for 53 years. "I need you to truly hear me," she stated. "I'm listening, Mom. What I did, the will, I didn't do it to punish Eve." Her eyes were steady and clear, devoid of anger or bitterness, embodying her characteristic delivery of truth, plain, warm, and utterly resolute. "I did it because it was the right thing to do, because your father and I built something together, and it belongs with someone who comprehends the true meaning of building something collaboratively." She squeezed my hand once. "You understand that?" I did. I understood it on a fundamental level. And Wesley, her voice softened slightly, becoming more deliberate. "I need you to contemplate your life. Not the financial aspects. Not any of this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything and nothing. "About whether you are happy. About whether you are loved in the way you truly deserve to be loved." She regarded me for a considerable interval. "Because you have been presenting yourself alone for a very extended period, my dear. And a man like you, a man who consistently shows up, deserves someone standing beside him when he does." The kitchen was enveloped in profound silence. Outside on Maplewood Drive, a car passed slowly. The refrigerator emitted a low hum. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and then fell silent. Every word she uttered was the unvarnished truth. My throat constricted. My eyes stung subtly at the corners. I did not avert my gaze from hers. "Yes," I responded, my voice emerging rough, quiet, and entirely sincere. "I know, Mom." She nodded once, slowly, as if that affirmation was precisely what she needed to hear. Then she patted my hand twice, mirroring the gesture she had bestowed upon my cheek in the hospital room 2 days prior, and released it. "Good." She retrieved her tea, took a sip, and placed it back down. "Now, are you going to answer that telephone or not?" My mobile device was buzzing on the table between us. "Eve, call number 29. I glanced at it, then at my mother. She raised an eyebrow. I picked up the phone, turned its face down, and let it vibrate against the wood until the ringing ceased. "Not yet," I stated. The corner of her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. "Not yet," she repeated softly, as if savoring the patience in the words. I will check on you this evening, I assured her, and tomorrow morning and every morning thereafter. She waved a dismissive hand. I know you will. I'm serious, Mom. Wesley. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses, which she had evidently put back on without my noticing. I know you're serious. You have always been serious. I departed Maplewood Drive at precisely 1:15 in the afternoon, drove back to Asylum Avenue, parked in the driveway behind Eve's silver CRV, and remained in my truck for a full minute. 34 missed calls. 34. I entered the house. Eve was in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa in her work attire, her phone clutched in both hands as if it were the only stable object remaining. She looked up the moment I crossed the threshold. Her eyes were raw, showing the signs of sleeplessness. A subtle transformation had occurred in her expression, something I hadn't witnessed before. The meticulously constructed composure she wore like a second skin had fractured, revealing beneath it a semblance of a woman who had spent the entire day comprehending the full extent of her actions. Good. A quiet thought registered in the back of my mind. Remain there for a while. Wesley. She rose immediately. I've been attempting to reach you all day. I am aware, I replied. I placed my keys on the hook by the door, and my thoughts drifted back to Wednesday night. To my mother, lying in that hospital bed, monitors attached to her chest, and four in her arm, to the EKG readings, the enzyme levels to DR. Lane's measured countenance as he informed me her body had been issuing warnings. And then to Eve's dinner and the girls' typical engagement, to the bread basket being passed while my mother's heart faltered in the darkness. I allowed that realization to settle in my chest for precisely 1 second. Then I looked at my wife. Did you know? Her voice wavered on the final word. About the will? Did you anticipate she would? No, Wesley. I did not. I discovered along with everyone else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, regaining her composure. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more controlled, but threaded through every word, like a wire pulled to its breaking point, was a palpable fear, the kind that surfaces when consequences finally catch up to past choices. She has utterly eclipsed me. Paul Logan's office had contacted me to confirm the amendments had been officially filed, and Wesley, do you grasp the implications? Everything we had been anticipating. Eve, my voice was calm, steady as I had ever heard it. I comprehend precisely what it signifies. Then speak with her. Her composure faltered again, subtly. Ask her to reconsider. Tell her it was a misunderstanding, that I intended to come to the hospital. You just what? She stopped. I took a single step toward her, not with aggression or anger, but with a quiet presence, a complete and silent presence I hadn't demonstrated in years, because I finally had nothing left to shield. You just had dinner with Joanne and the girls, I stated, while my mother was in a hospital bed experiencing a cardiac event, while I was seated in a plastic chair in a waiting room, consuming machine coffee under fluorescent lighting. I paused, while Clinton Webb sat in a parking lot for 3 hours, because that is what people do. The color drained from her face slowly, completely, like water vanishing from a glass. Rebecca made her decision. I said, just as you made yours, clearly, deliberately, and without seeking anyone's approval. Wesley, please. She has dedicated 82 years to showing up. My voice remained level. There was no need for it to rise. For my father, for me, for every person she has ever loved. She has never, not once, prioritized dinner over someone who required her. I regarded Eve for a prolonged interval. She has finally ceased expecting everyone else to do the same. The living room was utterly silent. Eve looked at me, truly looked perhaps for the first time in years, and I observed a profound shift across her features. It was no longer mere fear, something deeper than fear, the distinct expression of an individual who has finally fully comprehended the magnitude of their loss. Not the financial assets, not the testament, but me. She finally grasped that she had lost me, and the man standing before her, composed, clear-eyed, keys in hand, his heart finally at peace, was not the same man who had stood at the foot of those stairs on Wednesday morning, still hopeful she would ascend. That man was gone. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down at it. My mother's name appeared on the screen. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, a glimmer of something akin to hope. I returned her gaze for precisely 1 second, and I felt it, the final strand of something I'd been clinging to for 11 years, finally loosening its grip. Not with anger, but with something more tranquil, with release. I retrieved my keys from the hook. "I'm going to check on my mother," I announced. I opened the front door. The Hartford air greeted me, cold, clean, honest, and completely liberating. "Oh," I said, turning back one final time. Eve stood in the center of the living room, phone in hand, my mother's name illuminated on the screen, 38 calls representing the weight of consequence etched into every line of her face. I looked at her for precisely 1 second, and I felt nothing but absolute clarity. You should probably answer that. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. The kind of exhale that originates from a depth so profound you hadn't even realized you were holding your breath. I stood on that porch for a brief moment. The January air met my face, cold, clean, and honest, and a sense of peace settled over me that I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity, not anger, not bitterness, not the surge of a man who has finally had enough. Just clarity, the quiet, unmistakable clarity of a man who, after years of self-deception, of smoothing over issues, of suppressing emotions, of sleeping on the left side of a bed, leaving space for someone who never moved towards him, had finally seen his life precisely as it was. I had not been married for 11 years. I had been enduring for 11 years. There's a distinct difference. And standing on that porch, with my mother's voice still echoing in my ears and Eve's visage imprinted on my mind, I finally grasped it entirely. The hospital did not precipitate this realization. Rebecca Watson lying in that hospital bed, suffering a cardiac event while her daughter-in-law passed the breadbasket at dinner. That did not plant a seed. It incinerated the entire field, revealing precisely what had always been growing there. I walked to my truck and started the engine. The radio softly began to play, a familiar melody, something my father used to hum on Saturday mornings in the garage, and I allowed it to fill the space. I made no further decisions that night, with one exception. I would not be re-entering that house, not that night. And somewhere, in that place where a man knows things before he is ready to articulate them, I understood it wasn't merely about that single night. Loyalty and love are deserving of a lasting legacy. Was I wrong to let my mother remove my wife from her will? Or was my wife wrong to choose dinner over my mother's heart?